Welcome to another edition of the Packaging Europe podcast. I'm Tim Sykes, and I'm excited to host today's episode, which is exploring the role of the label in enabling packaging circularity. To guide us through this topic, we welcome three speakers coming from very different vantage points. So I think let's start straight away with some introductions. First of all, I'm delighted to welcome Nataliya Malhanova, who is Marketing Innovation Director at Avery Dennison. Nataliya, welcome. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your role within Avery Dennison?
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everybody. So yes, indeed, my name is Nataliya Malhanova, and I am delighted to work with an amazing group of team experts at Avery Dennison, specialized in self-adhesive labeling technologies. We look into solutions for different applications in different industries when it comes to innovation, of course, from food, beverage, home and personal care, all the way to very demanding and compliance-heavy areas like pharma and automotive. So super nice to be here.
Thank you very much. And secondly, welcome to Sergio Fregoni, who is Executive Director at IDEO. Sergio, can you tell us about IDEO? What is this organization?
Sure. Hi, team. Hi, Nataliya and Augusto. IDEO is design innovation consulting. You probably have heard of the company through some of our first products, like the Apple Mouse or the first usable laptop computer back in the 80s. And ever since then, our company has been at the edge of innovation through product design, but also service innovation, and even helping governments rethinking about their services to citizens. And my role specifically is to help some of our large organizations that we partner with to really push the edges at the intersection of digital and climate. That includes circular economy transformation, of course, and having real impact in their customer offers through design. Happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Augusto Bruno, who is Technical Manager at Plastics Recyclers Europe. Welcome, Augusto. Can you tell us what your focus is within PRE?
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for the invite, and hi, everyone. Indeed, I'm Augusto Bruno. I'm a Technical Manager at Plastics Recyclers Europe, at the association representing the European plastics recyclers. Within PRE, I work mainly in RecyClass. RecyClass is an initiative that was launched 6 years ago, advancing plastic packaging recyclability and promoting a transparent uptake of recycled content. Within RecyClass, we focus on developing science-based design for recycling guidelines for plastic packaging and recyclability evaluation protocols. On that, I'm mainly dedicated to rigid packaging, and also I'm part of the extension of the initiative to design for recycling guidelines and recyclability evaluation protocols applied to automotive and electrical and electronic equipments. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So let's get straight into this discussion, and I'd like to start with you, Nataliya. How do you see the role as the big picture of a label in facilitating eco-design in packaging?
A label is a very small element of packaging, but what we see, it's rather significant when it comes to eco-design. Yet, when we speak to brands, and if I ask designers, normally we get the answer that the label is purely there to convey the branding or to be this shelf appeal, this attraction point for consumers, and less so as an enabler of circularity or productivity. And for years, we've lived in a world where the only request for label was to stick well and look good. So we did that. But what we've seen is that for the last 10 years, Avery Dennison has gone through a transformation of portfolio for greater circularity needs. For instance, ensuring clean removability from different packaging types like PET or HDPE, following, of course, RecyClass guidance.
And can you talk in a bit more detail about the kinds of implications that design for recycling guidelines such as RecyClass and PPWR requirements have for label development, and how is that working out in practice in the collaboration between label businesses like yourselves and the other links in that FMCG value chain?
Yeah,
how is that changing?
Good question, Tim. Thank you. PPWR is a great development because it created an urgency for all players in the packaging industry to come with solutions. And it's always good to have that type of legislative push, but it's also important to stay in dialogue. So to give you an example, we had pretty stringent requirements for rigid plastic recycling when it comes to label design, where it didn't make sense when you look at the actual label usage during its lifetime. So we've done industrial, semi-industrial testing and worked together with RecyClass to readjust guidance to include the friction as the important element in label removal, not so much the wash of properties of it. So PPWR is great because it helps us to start talking, but then we need to look at all the aspects that the label is met with. And I see there is great development. Brands are proactively reaching out. They are reassessing their current portfolios of labels. So this is really great. I would encourage many more who hasn't done that to start doing it. But yet still I see some examples where brands try to do right and they jump into recyclability, for instance, but forget to take into account what type of demands does this label or packaging needs to go through before it ends up in the recycling stream.
Thank you very much. And let's turn to Augusto, and I'm delighted that we have the perfect person to talk about this topic on the podcast. Can you speak in a little bit more detail then, Augusto, about the specific requirements and demands on labels that are emerging from regulations that are specifying recyclability, specifying demands on PCR content, etc., and then translated into very specific guidelines through things like RecyClass?
Yes, sure. So in terms of regulation, I think we are all well aware that from the packaging and packaging waste regulation requirements, we need to ensure that as from 1st January 2030, all plastic packaging that is placed in the market is recyclable. And we need also to ensure a minimum amount of recycled content introduced in this packaging. For that, we need to ensure that when it comes to time, we will have enough quantity and quality of recyclates available to be used again in the same application. I would say that labels there play a key role because, of course, labels are part of the packaging, and we need to ensure that those labels will not disturb the recycling process and will not, I would say, affect the final quality of the recycled material, enabling us to use those pellets, those recyclates, again in the same type of packaging. In that sense, I think it was already mentioned that we have done several trials in RecyClass with the collaboration of Avery, Dennison, and also our other members that are working on this subject to understand from, I would say, a scientific point of view, as we always say in RecyClass, we need to have recommendations that are fact-based and science-based. We did these trials indeed to understand how labels will perform during the recycling processes, considering the state of the art recycling processes that are today in Europe. And on that, we have indeed seen that the friction, in this case, is a key parameter to be considered. And we have, from that experience, developed a new recyclability evaluation protocol to assess label reusability and to ensure that labels are with the robust procedure, a reliable procedure, in order to ensure that those labels will be releasable during the recycling process and will not affect the final quality of the recycled material. This is I would say, important to be highlighted for natural and white packaging, because if we cannot ensure a full releasability of those labels from a natural and white container, then this means that different pieces of labels will go into the extruder with the natural and white flakes, and you can imagine that these flakes will become pellets that will be colored, and those pellets will not be useful as a raw material or a recycled material to a natural and white new container. That's why we need to ensure that the right procedures are in place, and the different solutions, as it has been done by Avery Dennison, are tested, and we can indeed achieve the targets that are imposed by the legislator in this case.
Thank you. And are there any particular results from the trials that you've spoken about that have made certain considerations or challenges emerge that the industry may not have been aware of beforehand?
Yeah, I would say that the main thing to highlight is that we focused our attention to the grinding process. Before, the discussion was more focused on the washing process during the recycling process, and the idea was to try to get this label released during the washing process, which for the HDP and polypropylene recycling streams is a little bit difficult, because normally, usually recyclers are not using hot washing in Europe today, as it could be, for example, for the PET recycling stream, where we have a hot washing step. And therefore, we wanted to understand if the grinding process per se, due to the friction that the process is generating and imposing to the flakes, had something to do with the releasability of the labels. And indeed, we have seen there is a key step where you can have a big part of the labels already releasing from the container.
That's fascinating. Thank you. So in my introduction, I mentioned that we have three speakers with very different vantage points on this topic, and really keen to hear from Sergio now, who has, I guess, a perspective which is quite removed from the sort of standard stakeholders within packaging and materials and FMCG. So Sergio, I'm really interested to hear your views on how you see the function and the demands on labels changing over time from your perspective, and I guess I'm interested in how you see the role of the label as a communicative tool, this additional aspect of the label that Nataliya has already spoken to, and how that role starts to change as we think about the demands of the circular economy.
Yeah, thanks for the question, team. And yeah, I think I might have a slightly less technical perspective, but definitely a perspective that we've brought to many clients in the past few years of projects. But I think, look, in the short term, I think what we have discussed so far is essential, right? And thinking through how we better align, back to the point of Nataliya, of how do we understand the whole journey and how do we engage with stakeholders, from the brand to the recyclers. I think there is a fundamental aspect and role of labels that they need to play in aligning those stakeholders, right? And it's definitely essential. But if we start to look at for trends in regulations and how Europe is leading, and countries within Europe like France, and how they're leading really on the demand for more circularity, there is definitely a clear direction of travel, and that is towards the standardization of packaging platforms. And those are platforms that can be more, using more robust materials and, fostering reusability and upcycling and ultimately being interchangeable between companies or even products. And of course, if you start thinking about packaging that is more reusable, then the role of labels enabled by some of the technical advancements that Nataliya and Augusto were talking about, then we can start thinking about the role of packaging in a different way, right? And we did a little bit of research with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where we started to imagine the future of homes in 2030, and we speculated about what the role of packaging in a wasteless home could look like, right? And we started to question ourselves. Like we said, well, if packaging starts to be interchangeable between companies and products, well, then the packaging cannot convey the brand, right, as it used to do. And so this is when the role of labels can start to make a shift and potentially becoming even more important. Thinking about how a reusable packaging component can be then paired with a set of labels that are more customizable, potentially becoming digital passports, proof of ownership for products, and really unlocking those circular use cases where the label becomes a vehicle for returning and reselling, potentially, like bringing the information of the product. They also potentially become these new interface of new digital brand expressions, right? I mean, if you start thinking brand and how it might live beyond the packaging expression, then the label might be the unlock to digital expression of brands that live on a new layer, right? Which could be in a way advancing the traditional packaging experience, but also pushing brand in new territories that we haven't even thought about. So for me, going back to your question, like, how do you see the function of labels changing? I think it's a true unlock, but I think we are a bit stuck in a mindset of like seeing it as a small but significant thing, as Nataliya said before. Well, I think it could be rethought as the core of new future experiences that really connect a physical layer in a digital layer in the future.
So would you advise businesses to view this as a kind of an opportunity to embrace a changed mindset?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how packaging and labels are normally procured within organizations right now, it's usually an afterthought for many organizations, right? I mean, at the end, we were working actually with a large fashion organization, one of the largest, and their job is to produce clothing and distribute clothes, right? And when we were tasked to redesign their packaging, they're part of the group. They have several brands. Packaging was not a product. It was not managed as a product. It was seen as an ancillary thing. They were just buying and customizing it. But through rethinking the role of packaging as a platform that where we could actually reduce the variables of the individual brands buying packaging for themselves, we could start thinking about, okay, what are the new expressions that we can build by just operating on the label level while the packaging becomes a shared packaging platform, in different formats, which is shared across brands, where the label is actually then customized at the end of the, at the packing station right before shipping the product. It sounds like a simple change, but that needed to completely change the mindset of the organization, right? They were not used to buy, packaging in that way. But that required a level of alignment, which was quite phenomenal in a way, because, going from very cheap poly bags, which, the marketing team could change pretty much whenever they thought they wanted to going to something that was slightly more expensive, but was proving to have higher customer value because customers are actually responding better to this packaging solution. And both finding ways to fund it, but also finding ways to change the ways they were operating and being wired, because the personalization could now happen at a different moment, required a huge amount of shift in mindset and belief that actually this new solution, which was indeed more expensive, could lead to a better customer experience. And the outcome of that is that the H&M Group eliminated 100 million plastic bags from their supply chain and replaced them with a paper packaging platform with personalized labels in their supply chain. So this is just an example of how companies can start rethinking opportunities around that mindset shift.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So Sergio, I'm interested in the opportunities and also the risks that are involved in sort of homing in on the relationship with the end consumer and the consumer experience that comes from these kind of opportunities. Do you think it's important that customers putting labeled products onto the market will not be entirely driven by the end consumer experience and preferences, which may not always be the most sustainable pathway? Is there a kind of meeting between this focus on the label as a communicative tool and the kinds of technical considerations that we've heard Augusto talking about, thinking about the processes that packaging needs to undergo after disposal, and the recycling part of that equation?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Tim, and I think there is a real tension always whenever we design something, right? And there is a default posture of IDEO and how we run our projects, which is to really default to obsessing with customer centricity and really understanding what is it customers want, right? Because ultimately that's what is going to drive demand. And I think I've been in the space of like circular and climate for a very long time, and I think if there is one critique that I can make to this space is that we have been obsessing with some of the technical details, and we talk about it in a very technical way. But take the example of like solar panels. Solar panels are today probably the cheapest way of producing green electricity. And in many ways where there is no infrastructure is by far the best option and the cheapest option available. But if you ever tried to install solar panels on your roof, you would realize how cumbersome and ugly they are, right? I mean, the thing is that the technical solution is there, but the demand is not always there. And one of the reasons why is because we haven't made our sustainable products work hard enough to become the more desirable products, right? There is research being done that prove that users don't choose products based on their sustainability credentials. They buy products because they're better products, right? And so I think what we have to start thinking about is how do we make products that are sustainable and use those credentials to make them the best possible option for customers. And I think we haven't spent enough time obsessing and thinking about what is the design of a better option because of the sustainability credentials.
Thank you. Nataliya, would you like to build on Sergio's comments?
Yes, with pleasure, Tim. I'm fully aligned with Sergio when it comes to the customer centricity. I think this is really the most important thing, not only in the packaging industries, but in any industry. And, when I look at this sustainable way versus being customer-centric, I don't think that there is really a tension. I think that we simply are too focused. And Sergio, you said it yourself. We do not make the sustainability attractive enough or desirable enough. And with that, I also think we need to focus on the role everybody plays in contributing to this sustainability or to the eco-design. Being a consumer, I mean, why would I need to bother what type of label goes on which type of container? I do not produce those, right? So I would expect as a consumer that the company producing the final product will take the best care to make sure that this product is sustainable. Then what role can I play as a consumer? Most probably I can use or dispose of it in a good way. So if you want to, the only impact I can make is basically maybe help you collect or sort it. But that's it, really. So I think that we need to make sure that we do our job well. We make our best that we have the solutions in place for the packaging and ensure that the packaging is ready for the end of life. Then the design, of course, thinks through with the brands to make sure that there is this additional value created. And I really love the point, Sergio, you brought regarding the digital passport, gamification, right? Because indeed, there is the whole world of opportunities to explore on how can the label be that information, not only information carrier, but maybe this ongoing connection point, creating dialogue between the brand and consumer. So that's the part I'm very excited about.
Thank you, Nataliya. And Augusto, do you think there's a kind of gap that we need to bridge between the rather technical guidelines that PRE releases, and on the other hand, driving more fundamental behavioral change on the part of businesses across the value chain, and indeed on the part of end consumers?
Yes, so I would say that the guidelines are there as we'll say toolbox where companies can go and pick different elements they are using in their packaging and ensure that those elements are, and I refer to RecyClass guidelines, in the green column, preferably, or the yellow column. Sometimes those guidelines can be a little bit technical indeed, but I think from a RecyClass perspective, we try to make it as simple as possible for the industry to use the recommendations we are issuing to close probably these gaps that you mentioned, Tim, between the different actors in the value chain and the right recommendations on how to design a plastic packaging. There is a lot of education as well that we do from RecyClass from a point of view of giving the right tools to the industry. We have the set of design for recycling guidelines on one side, and we have a very useful tool as well. There is the online tool. This is a free tool that can be used by anyone. It's on our website. Anyone can use it. They just need to sign in. And there they have the design for recycling guidelines translated in a tool that is asking you step by step the different elements you have in your plastic packaging, and it's giving you the class that you are obtaining in regard to the recyclability of your packaging, and of course then it's the responsibility of every actor involved in the value chain to select the right elements for the different components they are producing and they are introducing in the packaging. And in that sense, I would say that I totally get Sergio's point there on having something that as well will be appealing to the end customer. And I think that companies should work on indeed having something appealing, but respecting the design criteria that we have issued, because this design criteria is supported by scientific evidence, but fact-based information that we have generated over the years with several testing that we have done. And by respecting those guidelines, they will be able to have a recyclable packaging, and they will be able to comply with the requirements that the legislator will ask them as from 1st of January 2030. So I would say that indeed it's important to give these tools to the industry and to give them in the simplest way possible, I would say, as we try to do it from RecyClass side, so everyone can be aware and can use these tools. I would say that the different actors of the value chain are very committed. I can say so because in RecyClass we have seen an interesting increase of the members that have joined in the past years. Today we have more than 120 members. We have a specific task forces working on labels applied on plastic packaging. So I see that the value chain is well committed. I think they are indeed moving to the right direction here.
Thank you. And Augusto, do you see areas in which we maybe need more education in order to drive the impacts that are made possible by things like RecyClass? And if so, who do you think should be delivering that and how?
So I would say that in terms of plastic packaging recyclability, there are still a lot of investigations to be done because you know that the plastic packaging, in the end, you have a lot of components, a lot of features, and we see a lot of innovation coming from the different companies. And I would say that we need to educate the companies on what are the current processes that are available in Europe. And for that, I mean from the collection, going to the sorting and to the recycling processes, because we need to understand that when we put the packaging in the market, it will never be recycled if it's not well collected. So this is the first thing. If it is not well sorted, so we need to ensure that everything that we are adding needs to be sorted. We see sometimes, for example, very good innovations in terms of the recycling process. So elements that will be not disturbing at all the recycling process itself, but that are not sorted in the right stream. So if we cannot sort this in the right stream, namely HDP, PP, PS, PET, etc., then this will never arrive to the recyclers' facilities and therefore will never be recycled. So we need to have in mind also this part of the process. And then last but not least, the recycling process itself. We need to be sure that any innovation that we are coming with is compatible with the stream where this packaging will end up. I think that the different stakeholders, the different actors in the value chain need to be aware of these 3 steps and need to be aware that those 3, all the components they are included in the packaging need to be aligned with the current recommendations, the current design for recycling guidelines that are, of course, considering these 3 steps, but they need to be very well aware that in case we are coming with an innovation, a component that was not tested before, we need to do a test. We need to understand from a robust testing procedure as the ones we have in RecyClass if this component is recyclable or not. Once they have understood that, then we can ensure that this new element will not disturb the stream, will be compatible, and therefore we will be able to obtain high quality recyclates, and then we will be able to reach the targets that are defined.
Thank you very much. And Sergio, I guess you would have a kind of broader perspective on the role education might play in driving sustainable transformation.
Yeah. So I think so. If you're referring to education as in like L&D programs, then I might say that yes, most organizations probably need to upskill themselves on understanding like circular design principles and definitely having more material experts, for example, in their teams. But taking a step back, I think more than actively educating, I think it's about testing and a culture of experimentation, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're learning every day, and I think there's one thing that we think at IDEO that is extremely important is to have a strong and compelling vision. So having making sure that companies nurture the ability of their leaders to really always, thinking about what the vision for the future might look like. And I think that's a muscle that we all need to keep working on. Alongside with that comes the idea of like having a long-term perspective. Like very often we're too focused on the short-term goals and the quarter. I think it needs both, again, visionary leaders, but also a muscle to be developed inside organizations to start thinking about what are the implications of our choices beyond the term of the next CEO, right? Which is 3 to 4 years. But we have to start thinking a little bit more long term, particularly when it comes to circular design. And then it's about designing more systemically, right? I mean, it came through the whole conversation. It's designing for the whole end-to-end value chain. I think too many organizations are working in silos. And thank God there are organizations that are bringing some of those value chains together. But then many of those organizations tend to default to their perimeter and protecting that in much of their day-to-day operations. So alongside the institutional R&D around design practices around designing for circular, I think there is a broader aspect of like continuous learning, really, and having kind of a vision, long-term view, and really starting to think more systemically about the impact of what we put out there in the world, really. So yeah, this would be my take.
Thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end of our allotted time for this podcast, but maybe I'll give Nataliya a chance to have the final word. So Avery Dennison sort of sits in the middle of this landscape that we've spoken about, Nataliya, kind of at the intersection between the technical demands of label production and technical considerations around design for recyclability, and then on the other side, meeting customer needs and therefore thinking about consumer-facing considerations. Could you maybe give us a final summing up of how Avery Dennison views this sort of matrix of complex choices and obligations that are faced by labels?
Yes, Tim, thank you. So the first point I think that we've changed in our approach is that instead of looking at labels, we started to look at packaging types. So whatever advice we give or whatever research, R&D, innovation we are doing, we do it in the pillars of packaging type. So specific for plastic, rigid plastic, glass, paper, and looking at all these different requirements and need, and as Augusto said, the design criteria. With that, we then advise which labels to use, which adhesives to use, and if we do not have something in place, we innovate and engineer for it. And I would like to reassure, if there are any designers listening to this podcast, Augusto mentioned design criteria, you need to apply to them, you need to stay strict with them, but that's absolutely true. The good news is pressure-sensitive labels is the most versatile label decoration technology. So I am not afraid that you will not find what you're looking for in terms of, the visual effects or tactility, plus the requirement to ensure recyclability of final package. So don't be scared. The criteria are there in place, but there are lots of solutions. And if it's difficult to comprehend, which label to use where, the most simplest rule you can start following today is paper on paper, plastic on plastic. Second point for me would be, and Sergio, you summarized this again now, to look at the complete journey, the full circle. So when you design a packaging and when you think about the label, you start thinking about material selection. So all the elements of the packaging are taken into account. This is exactly the moment where you need to start thinking about, what are my end of life requirements, so recyclability, but what are also my requirements during the product in use, So, you know, when it's a wine bottle, it potentially goes into ice bucket. You want the label to stay beautifully on it, right? Or if you want to use your shampoo under the shower, you would also prefer to have a label stay on it and not being washed off. So all these elements need to be taken into account at the design phase. So that's important. And the third element, if we look at sustainability, circularity, and I'm challenged a bit now by Sergio to look to the future as well. I'm very excited because next to material science capabilities, at Avery Dennison, we also have a know-how in bridging physical and digital. And we started that in apparel industries, but we see now there is quite an interest and innovation and development that might find its way into consumer packaged goods. So this is where a label, you know, with a digital enabled label will help not only for consumer engagement, but also for transparency and visibility across supply chain and potential also waste reduction. So these are the use cases that I'm very excited to look forward, because this will in the end contribute also to the circularity of within our industry.
Thank you very much. And thank you also to Augusto and Sergio for sharing your expertise on this podcast. So finally, I just want to ask each of you to tell our audience where they can go to connect with you or to get more information on your organizations and on this topic. Let's start with Augusto.
Yes, so you can go to RecyClass.eu. There we have a lot of information from all the technical reviews of all the tests we have performed in the past. We have also our free online tool that I mentioned during the podcast. And of course, you can drop us a message in our info box if you have specific questions. We will be happy to answer it.
Thank you. Sergio.
Yeah, sure. So just visit IDEO.com and search for some of the case studies about packaging, or hop into our blog for all of the thought leadership and thinking that we put in, thinking about the future of things and methodologies, or go to a bookstore and search for some of our books about human-centric design and strategy. So any of these tools is available for you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Nataliya.
So experts at Avery Dennison are looking forward to meet you and to answer any of your needs or questions on your transformational journey towards circular packaging. And do not reinvent the wheel, therefore, but connect to us. You can connect via label.averydennison.com or simply find me on LinkedIn and I will make the connection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just want to leave a couple of housekeeping messages. First of all, at Packaging Europe, we will be continuing to engage in discussions about labeling and the wider topics touching on packaging sustainability, not least through our Sustainable Packaging Summit. And that takes place at the end of this year, over 3 days, from the 10th to the 12th of November in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And secondly, a reminder that the Packaging Sustainability Awards, the so-called Nobel Prize for Packaging Sustainability, are now open for submissions, and you can get details about that on the Packaging Europe website. For now, thank you very much for engaging with today's episode, and special thanks to Nataliya, Augusto, and Sergio for taking part. Back soon with another podcast. Goodbye.